Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for being with us again today for day 2 of the 5th Annual International Women's Day Summit. Our next discussion is going to be on the topic of diversity and fairness. Our guests will be discussing that, particularly diversity and fairness in AI. Bonica Wilson will be interviewing Virginia Dignam. Now, Bonica is the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer at Invest Atlanta. She leads their strategies around diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as supporting programs that advance economic mobility across the city of Atlanta. And Professor Dignam is the Professor of Responsible AI at Umeå University in Sweden. So we are welcoming both of these ladies today for their discussion on diversity and fairness in AI. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me here. Welcome.
Bonica, hello. Professor, are you coming to us from Sweden today?
Yes, I'm all the way in North Sweden, covered with 1 meter of snow, but it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you.
Thank you.
While we're waiting for Bonica to join us, you can give us just a little bit of your background on the work that you do there at the university and
sure.
Thank you.
So, like Claudia already said, I'm a professor of responsible artificial intelligence. I have a background in engineering and computer science, and I've been working in AI for over 30 years now, so since the middle of the 80s, long before AI was the hype that it is now. In all my professional career, both in industry as in academia, I have been focusing on the impact that AI has on people and society and organizations and all of us. So that's the background which brings me here today. I've been advising the European Union, UNICEF, the World Economic Forum, and many other organizations in terms of how to better understand the impact of AI and how to better design AI systems and use AI systems to take into account that impact, both positive and negative impact.
Wonderful, thank you. And Bonica, you've joined us. So I would just ask the professor a little bit of the background on the work that she does. And now thank you for coming to us. You are on mute, it shows. So just make sure you take yourself off mute there, but you can take it away now with Professor Dignam. Thank you.
Well, hello. Thank you so much for having me. You know, you can practice all day long for these events, and then as soon as it's time, your internet goes out or you don't have audio. So forgive me, but I am so excited to talk with you today, Professor Dignam. I couldn't wait for the opportunity. So I'd love to hear, we heard a little bit about your background. I would love to hear what led to your interest in AI? We see there's very few women in the AI industry, in the field, and would love to hear how you got interested and started in the industry.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for this question. Indeed, like I just said, I have been working in AI since 1986, so long ago, long before AI is the hype that we have today. I studied AI at university at that time. I'm originally from Portugal. I have been living and working in the Netherlands, Swaziland, Australia, and now in Sweden, including also Portugal and the Netherlands. And the main interest or what brought me to AI in the first place was the need to develop systems, and that like I say, was in the 80s, to the increased need that organizations had to have systems which would be able to take some decisions at the level of expertise that people had. So we start very much from the idea that we could reproduce human expertise in AI systems on a very limited scale and very limited scope of activities. And from there, the field has evolved to what we have today, in which AI is being used and applied in across all types of applications and affecting our lives in many more ways than the ones we are aware of. So AI is becoming a hidden technology which we don't really know anymore that we are interacting with. And that makes both a very exciting field, but a very many challenges in terms of applications and impact on society. But you are right. There are not so many women working in the field yet, and it is showing, and it's one of the concerns that we have is on the lack of diversity, not only the gender diversity, but also cultural diversity, ethnicity, and the different cultures and different approaches to life in general.
I totally agree. I was actually reading something, the statistics the other day, and I understand that more than 80% of AI professors are men. So I'm wondering, how can we increase diversity, as you already mentioned, of women and minorities in the AI field? What do you think we need to do as women to help, younger girls as they start in early education, elementary school? What can we do to just increase the excitement around the industry and to make sure that we're having more diversity and inclusion in the AI industry?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, the diversity in AI reflects a lot the diversity in all of STEM disciplines. So in science, technology, mathematics, and engineering, we see this lack of diversity. Like I said, not only gender but also ethnicity, and it's indeed something which starts at the basic school, at the primary school, at kindergarten probably, and it has a lot to do on how we present these more technical disciplines and to the children, to our children, to young people. It is still very much presented from the idea that it's a very formal type of discipline, a discipline in which you will be mostly calculating, doing some mathematics, doing very formal work, hidden in some back room, and just you on your computer, and that gives some kind of impression, and it's much less attractive to girls, is much less attractive to different ethnicities and to different cultures, and we really have to show the impact, how AI is really impacting the world, how we are seeing this type of systems making choices, making decisions that impact people's lives. AI systems are deciding who gets a subsidy or not. AI systems are deciding who gets parole or not. AI systems are deciding who gets credit or not. And if we really start looking at this type of technologies from their impact, from the position in society, I think that it will be a much more attractive field for girls, but we really need to change the narrative.
I absolutely agree with you, Professor, on that. When you brought up criminal justice systems and other systems, because we are introducing AI into so many other industries. What risk does AI pose in the criminal justice industry and healthcare industry specifically?
I think that the risks in criminal justice and in healthcare are probably similar to the risks in other types of fields. The point is that we associate AI systems with systems that always are correct, that are intelligent, that's part of the name, and that therefore are going to make always some correct decisions. AI is not intelligence. AI is a technique which is based on the analysis of a lot of data, really millions and millions examples of data, and it extracts patterns from that data. Hello? Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I just lost my video, but if you hear me, okay, now we are back. Sorry. Sorry. There is something wrong with this system. Anyway, so AI analyzes a lot of data, takes a lot of data into account, and finds patterns in that data. AI doesn't understand the meaning of the data it is looking at. It can identify cats in pictures, and that I believe that at this moment is better at identifying cats in pictures than any of us in all kinds of strange positions and so on. But it doesn't know what a cat is. It doesn't understand the meaning of a cat. It doesn't understand that the cat is an animal which is alive, which is is able to feel pain, to eat, to what. So all what we associate with a cat, AI is not possible, is not understanding that. So the decisions it takes is based on a certain type of positioning of pixels in a picture, in that case. And this happens again and again in all the decisions and all the situations in which we are applying AI. AI is looking at the data that we give it. AI is finding patterns in that data. If that data has not enough diversity, AI will never be able to make a correct decision in terms of diversity. If that data is not providing enough information about all the different people there, so if you don't have data, for instance, about a certain type of health condition, AI will not be able to make decisions on that. If the data is only collected for a certain group, then AI will be much better at identifying patterns in that group than patterns in other groups, because it doesn't, we call it intelligent, but it just is, we are not in cameras, so what happened to the camera? I'm sorry. Yeah, now I'm back in the camera. Sorry, something went wrong with my. So that, like I was saying, we really need to understand that AI makes decisions based on the purpose that we people design it for. And if we are designing it with limited information and providing it limited diversity and data, the system will not be able to be better than what we make it for.
Yes, Professor, it sounds like it's like our smartphones that are not as smart as we think they are. You know, they're auto-correcting the wrong words. And so it sounds a lot like that.
Exactly,
so, yeah. And it sounds like what you're saying is that the system is only as intelligent as the person programming the system. Is that correct?
Yes, except that it's not one person who programs it. There are usually a lot of people programming it. But again, if we don't have enough diversity in the group that is programming it, probably we don't come up with all the possible ideas or options that we would have in a more diverse group. Because the wisdom of the crowd will provide much more ideas and much more conditions, much more situations which we can program the system for. So we really need to increase the diversity in the development groups. And also we need to increase the participation of the users, of the ones who are going to be affected by these systems in the design of the systems.
So I was talking to a friend at a financial institution, and they were talking about robotics and how they had programmed the robots to make work more efficient. And so what they were finding was that the robots were almost declining applications at the same rate that humans were. And the whole goal of the robots was to take out some of the bias. And so I guess my question is, how can we ensure in AI, ethical and accurate representation of diverse populations if there is that bias that the robotics can take on from its developer or its programmer? How can we ensure accuracy and diverse populations and ethics, if you will, when we have people who have bias as programmers?
Yes, of course we have bias, and we all have bias, and we all need bias, because bias enables us to focus our attention in what is important at the moment. So at this moment, I'm focusing on your voice, on your image, and not in what's happening in my back. And that is the kind of bias which makes us survive and makes us be active, be able to be active. So we cannot really ignore or eliminate all bias from the world. We do need to eliminate those bias which leads us to prejudice and to leads us to take decisions which are more beneficial to a certain group to another group. When we develop AI systems, and indeed you talk about accuracy, you talk about efficiency, and there is where the things start. Are we making the systems accurate about what? Are we making the systems efficient on what? Is it efficient in terms of the speed at which it is able to process applications, or is it efficient in the sense that it's able to take into account more conditions, more diversity into those decisions? So how we define the metrics by which we measure the systems influence what they are being programmed for. If we are programming for speed, for making decisions as quick as possible, we are by definition leaving behind other types of options, other types of principles. If we are programming or develop systems to ensure the overall security of population, we probably will need to drop some of the privacy requirements that are needed to a specific individual, because we are focusing on the beneficial of the group and not of the individual. So these choices, these dilemmas that are inherent to any decision making are the issues that we really need to discuss even before anyone starts programming these systems. And these discussions need to be taken at all levels and need to be taken outside the programming room. They need to be taken by the developers, but also by the users, by policymakers, by interest organizations, by NGOs, by governments, before even, and then we have to define there which are the values that really matter for the system, and who are the groups, who are the individuals that are the ones who get to have a say about what these systems are going to be developed for. Because if we don't do this, we are leaving the decision to the last piece on the chain, which is probably the programmer, which indeed is someone who has its own background, its own behavior, its own expectations, and doesn't get no guidance which side to go one way or another, and it will take its own approach to it. Take fairness for a case. For example, we can define fairness as equality and ensuring that we provide, if we have a limited number of resources, we give everybody the equal amount of those resources. That in most cases, we would consider this to be a good measure of fairness. We can also look at fairness as being the equal opportunities. So it's not so much about giving everybody the same resources, but giving those who need more resources. In some countries, I don't know how it's in the United States, but here in Europe, in many countries, all families, independently of what is their background and their economic power, they all receive a certain amount, a fixed amount of child support from the government. Doesn't matter if you get $1 million a year or if you get $10 a year. Everybody who has a child gets, let's say, $100 per month for that child. That is fair in the sense that you give everybody the same number of amount for the child, and everybody gets the same opportunity. If we look at equal opportunities, then it makes no sense to give $100 a month to families who get $1 million a year, and we can divide that same amount of resources by others who need it more. But these decisions are not the decisions that the AI system is going to make. These are the decisions that we have to agree, we have to decide where we want our society to go. And then once we have those agreements, someone can program the system to divide things equally or to give more to the ones who need most. But it's not AI that is going to take that decision for us.
That's right. Professor Dignam, you are talking my language now. I always talk about the difference between equity and equality, and people think
exactly. Yeah.
Equality is, I always use the example of all the kids get a bike, but you don't realize that one of the kids is handicapped. And so he has one leg, so he doesn't need a regular bike. And so that's equality. Is that fair? Not to the kid who doesn't have, two legs.
Exactly.
It's not fair. And so we have to look at what people need and meet them where they are.
Exactly.
So I love that you're mentioning that. The other thing is, I want to go back to, you had mentioned, having these conversations with developers and programmers and how important that is. And so my question is, for our guests today, how do they start those conversations? What questions should they ask within their organizations to get those questions and conversations started so that we can move the needle?
Thank you. Yes, that's a very important one. Where do we start and who we should start? We can start it in different ways. We can start by talking with our policymakers, with our governments, to demand some level of guarantees, some level of minimum acceptable guarantees and principles that we want these systems to make. And we can do that by our democratic processes and really talking to our policymakers, to our governments. We can start the conversation as consumers. We as consumers have the power to choose which type of systems we want to use and which type of systems we don't want to use. In the same way that we have the power to go to the supermarket and demand that the food that the supermarket sells us is edible or is organic or is free range or whatever kind of things. As a consumer, we have a lot of choices and we have that power. We can demand this power on AI. We can demand from the companies which are selling us the AI-based products or are forcing us to use this type of products, that we want to have more transparency about how the decisions of the system come about, that we want to get explanation, that we want to have some guarantees that the systems are indeed taking fairness as being equity or as being equality. And maybe it doesn't matter which one it is, but at least we demand that we want to know those things. And in our own organizations, we can start the discussions in terms of who is going to be involved in the definition and the specification of these systems. We can demand that the development, if we are in organizations that are developing this type of systems, we can demand that the participation in the development teams are more inclusive and includes, and I'm not even talking about gender and ethnicity, but includes different opinions, different world perspectives, different disciplines, that people with different backgrounds are involved and looked at the systems, are part of the discussion on how are we going to develop these systems. And in my experience, the development teams do welcome this participation. They really are looking and asking for more guidance, wider and broader guidance in the type of systems that are being developed.
That's awesome. So do you feel like that's the best way to, you talked about bias, and some bias is actually okay and normal. And so my question, I guess, is when you talk about the diversity of industries and cultures and all of that coming into the room, do you feel that that is the best way to in fact limit the negative biases that exist and just have the good biases, is to have the diversity and not only in representation demographically, but also in industries and education and all of that? Do you feel like that's the best way to attack the negative bias within AI?
I'm not sure if it's the best way. I think it's a way to do it, and indeed it is by starting the questioning, by giving. Trying to understand what is the reasoning, what is the data, what is the background of the decisions that the system is making. And there is a lot of work on that at universities and industries all over the world to make it more clear and demanding more constraints in the way that the systems are developed, and that will support understanding what is the bias or what bias is there on the system. But it starts already by the data that is being collected. It starts by who is collecting the data and who is marking that data. In order for AI to learn, it needs to learn from examples. If those examples are not well described, because you don't really tell enough about the picture that the system should be looking at, or the decisions, the past decisions that the system is going to take as an example. So if we don't describe these examples in a sufficiently diverse and descriptive way, then we don't really have the information for AI to start from.
That's great. Reagan asked a great question, or is this Kissy?
Yes.
She said that, are there agencies or case studies that quantify or qualify this data so people can be made more aware and educated on how AI impacts and is also woven into our everyday lives?
There is a lot of work and a lot of actions at this moment in exactly to do that, to provide these guarantees, these certificates that the data or the systems that you are using are indeed aligned with a certain level of fairness or a certain level of privacy or so on. There is not enough yet of wildly enough accepted option in this case. For instance, here in Europe, we have, in terms of minimum demands of privacy and use of private data, and ensuring that the data that is being used doesn't really identify you in negative ways. We have the laws around the GDPR, the General Protection Regulations in Europe. In some other countries, you have similar type of securities concerning the privacy, your own private data, and the way that that data is used by organizations or is allowed to be used or not. And in the same way, there are starting to be standards, there are starting to be agencies, certification agencies, which will be able to provide, let's say, a seal or a stamp, like that indicates what is the level of guarantees that can be given about a certain system. But those are, like I said, they are not wide enough yet. It's still being worked on.
Got it. So that's very good. Now, I want to just move a little bit away from this and talk about, because I don't want to seem like, AI is bad. We love AI. AI is a good thing because it helps us. It helps automate systems. It helps with augmentation
Sure.
of workflow. So AI is a great thing. And so my question is, how can AI be used to make workplaces more inclusive, and how can we leverage that, the AI?
So AI can do a lot of the work that we don't want to do. So it can automate a lot of the tasks which we don't like, which also means that it can automate a lot of the tasks which are at this moment kind of causing the brain, or let's say the tasks which are associated with a certain gender or a certain class or so on. So we can make those tasks, move those tasks to AI, which means that all of us have the bigger opportunity to focus on those aspects of work, aspects of the economy that are better aligned with our own interests, with our own backgrounds. So in the same way that we don't spend anymore a lot of time in factories or in calculations or administration tasks, because we have calculators, we have automated factories and so on, which then as proportionate the younger generations or our generations comparative with that of our parents and grandparents, a completely different approach to work and also to the balance between work and the family life. And those are completely different now than they were, like, let's say, 100 years ago. AI will, like washing dishes, someone puts there in the chat. Yes, indeed. If we have a washing machine that washes our dishes, it doesn't need to be an intelligent thing, but it is giving us the time to focus on things which are really important for us. And that will cause the possibility for all of us to express our diversity and to show the potential and the importance of all our diverse contributions to society in a way that we maybe don't have at the moment.
Got it. Now, we don't mind the AI not being smart, but as long as they can wash our dishes, we might
sure.
take you up on that.
Exactly.
The last question I want to ask you is, as we wrap up, what should we look forward to? Cutting edge, anything innovative coming out with in AI in the next couple years? Is there anything that we should be on the lookout for that's exciting and leading edge around AI in the next few years?
I think that what is probably the most interesting, maybe it's not the most visible, but I think directly, but it's the possibility to build AI systems that are less invasive in our data, so that they can reach the same type of quality in decision without demanding all this amount of data that we need now. And with that, also demanding much less of the computational power that they use now. I'm really looking forward to, because the elephant in the room when we talk about AI is energy, is the energy consumption of these systems. These systems, together with all the data warehouses around the world, are really consuming more energy than any middle city in the world. So it's really a huge amount of energy which goes into these systems. We really need to, and I think that that will be the breakthroughs in AI in the coming years, is to achieve the same type of quality of, and better even quality of decision, a much more diverse and fair and inclusive quality of decisions, and at the same time being able to do that with a fraction of the energy that we are using at the moment.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. We would love to see energy costs go down and be more efficient. And so I love the fact that AI can be tied to that. Just in wrapping up, is there any last minute comments or things that you want to add for our guests to think about, so that we can have impact? Anything you want to just end with today?
I think that the most important is to realize that we do have a voice, all of us, and that we do need to make this voice heard in many different ways, including in the development of AI systems and in the options and the decisions that these systems, that we are comfortable and wanting these systems to make for us.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. And ladies, you heard it. We all have a voice and we all can make impact. So thank you, Professor Dignam, for your time today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you both very much, Professor Dignam and Bonica, for that very interesting conversation. And yes, a great reminder that we can all make a difference.